Folks, we could be standing on the brink of a new war in the Middle East. Things are possibly even in the latter stages where nobody can withdraw, nobody can hold back a flood of things that are coming. We could be in the last moments. This could be the last day that we have a shot at avoiding a new war in the Middle East, one which could have unprecedented consequences and unpredictable consequences for the United States, for Israel, for the people in the region, even some of our allies in the region. A lot is at stake here. Back in, let's see, I guess prior to the election in 2020, I wrote a book. You may have seen it over my shoulder here. It's called The 11th Hour in 2020 America. It was subtitled How America's Foreign Policy Got Jacked Up and How the Next Administration Can Fix It. And in that book, I talked about a lot of things about how at the 11th hour, it was late in America. We've had such a bad foreign policy for so many years that we were headed in a direction where things could go really bad, and we could end up in unnecessary wars, I warned in that, if we didn't make significant changes. Well, I've just published a piece just this afternoon at the National Interest called with a title of Our Last Chance to Avoid a War in the Middle East, same title as this episode here. And in that, I say it's basically if 2020 was 11th hour in 2020 America, we're now at 11:59 p.m. in 2024 America. And we have not only, the Biden administration not only failed to fix many of the problems that I identified in that book, but have also added to the problems. And now then there's something even worse that's going on. And it's not just limited to the administration, as you're going to see in some of the clips I've got coming up here. But this is something that's broader, just affecting the entire so-called elite of the United States. There is this unwillingness or inability, I'm not sure which it is, to acknowledge just basic on-the-ground reality. And look, I get it. People want to have a certain outcome. They have preferences on the way they'd like to see things work out with. That's fine. That's no problem. It's never been a problem. What is a problem, though, is when you have this abject unwillingness, or as it may have evolved into an inability to recognize where there are limitations to your power and recognize where you can and cannot go just because you desire something, and to then moderate your policies to reflect reality. Instead, we want to just keep on using words and saying, I don't care what's going on the ground. I'm just going to keep saying things that are nonsense, things that are just self-evidently untrue, and I'm going to keep going down the path, I think, oblivious to the fact that there could be consequences. I think that the senior leaders in our country and senior policymakers and the opinion leaders have gone so long at just saying whatever they wanted, and then they're not concerned about the consequences because they usually affect other people. It's usually other countries that pay the price for that, and I think a lot of people in the United States at the senior levels are okay with that. It's hard for me to say that. It's uncomfortable for me to say that because my country is supposed to have stood for all these years for the right, for what's morally right, to help the people who need help, who were powerless, to push back against the forces of evil and wickedness, as we've said many times, and to help the people who have, don't have any power for themselves, and to elevate them, to take care of those kind of people. That's been what's supposed to have been at least a hallmark. Now, I'm not naive enough to believe that that's always been the case, or that there hadn't always been, nefarious intents behind a lot of even these ostensibly good things that we have done. But the fact is, we have done lots of good things in the past. And now then, we're at the brink right now of not only squandering all those things, but now then to have gone so far in ignoring reality and pursuing our preference at the expense of reality, that we could now finally be the ones on the suffering end of a war. And we could be right on the end, because things that have happened in the last few days, it is possible that Iran, because of some things that Israel has done recently, could be in the final stages of ordering attack, could come literally hours from now as we're making this video here. We'll see how it's going to work out. But we want to back up a little bit from even before what's happened in the last few days and what could be already unfolding even as I'm making this video, and that is Benjamin Netanyahu. I talk about a lot of what Americans are unwilling to talk about basic reality. Well, Benjamin Netanyahu is the king of that in Israel, and is in no small part responsible for what's unfolding, although we bear a significant consequence of responsibility because of our failure to have any kind of leadership and to assert American national interest with American power, and we have subverted that and just handed it over to Israel. But Benjamin Netanyahu, on I believe it was the 24th of July, addressed a joint session of Congress, something that's supposed to be reserved only for the greatest of honors for foreign leaders. Came and tried to rally people behind him and said, hey, this is really about you. What we're doing in the Middle East, it's all about you.
I choose my words carefully. We've jointly developed some of the most sophisticated weapons on earth that help protect both our countries. And we also help keep American boots, we help keep Americans' boots off the ground while protecting our shared interests in the Middle East.
See, what he's saying there, and has said, almost every day since October the 7th, is that everything that's happening in the Middle East is somebody else's fault. They're innocent. Israel is completely innocent. They didn't do anything. And now all these bad actors are taking advantage of them. But because of things that Israel and the United States are doing in the weapons department and in the ability to have, to develop all these weapons, I think he's talking about the Iron Dome. It's going to keep American boots off the ground. So we need your air power, we need your naval power, and we need your ammunition, your air defense interceptors, et cetera, from the Iron Dome and all that stuff, so that you don't have to put boots on the ground, so that we can keep fighting here for us. Like, he can predict war and he can control war. But when wars start, very often they take on a life of their own. We have been pretty good and lucky over the last several decades, and all these wars that we keep fighting, because we are able to control them, and they can be relatively small level. And we've been fighting against people who haven't been able to put much resistance back. And so we've been able to successfully stumble through, even on bad decisions, even on wars that should never have been fought, like the Iraq War, or wars that should have ended way, way earlier than they did, like the Afghanistan war. But we could get away with that. And again, we didn't pay a price, though the people on the ground in Iraq and in Afghanistan most assuredly did. But now then there's a situation developing where that may not be the case, that the opponents that we may be going against here do have capacity that others have not. And we're going to see how that's going to cause play into what's going on here. And let me just show you a little bit from what I wrote in that article today, kind of how we got into this situation here. One of the things I wrote there, if you can bring that first one up there, the Department of Defense has ordered the deployment of additional U.S. combat power to the region, including air and naval assets, as well as additional ground troops. An official DoD release claimed these defensive capabilities are all in support of deterrence and de-escalation. Deputy Pentagon Press Secretary Sabrina Singh said, the best way to de-escalate the situation, quote, is for this ceasefire deal to come through so that we can get American hostages out as well, end quote. While that brief swell is embarrassingly untrue, as Israel just assassinated the chief Hamas negotiator with whom ceasefire talks were ongoing. It was that assassination in the heart of Tehran, in fact, that has been the source of the looming Iranian retaliation on top of other Israeli assassinations of Hezbollah leaders in Lebanon. America may be trying to use diplomatic means to prevent an Iranian response, but our actions are making war more, not less, likely. And we had just a couple of hours ago, I think it was, maybe not even that long ago, State Department spokesman Matt Miller talked about what Secretary of State Anthony Blinken has been doing along those lines. Now, when he says that he's trying to negotiate to try to prevent things escalating, what he means is that Blinken is trying to say, hey, we still want Israel to be able to do everything they do to assassinate all these people, and we just don't want you to respond. We'll see how successful that is, but here's how Miller put it.
We are at a critical moment for the region, and it is important that all parties take steps over the coming days to refrain from escalation and calm tensions. Escalation is in no one's interest. It's not in the interest of any one country, it's not in the interest of the region, and it's certainly not in the interest of the millions of civilians who just want to live their lives free from violence and conflict. The Secretary is also making clear through these engagements But the United States continues to see a ceasefire in Gaza as the crucial step to helping calm broader tensions, in addition to, of course, securing the release of hostages and addressing the ongoing suffering of the Palestinian people in Gaza. And he is reiterating that all parties need to look for reasons to say yes to an agreement, not look for reasons to delay or say no. As the Secretary has emphasized, this is an important moment for the region, and it is critical that parties make the right decisions over the coming days.
Okay, that's just embarrassing, because he's acting there like our American policy is for there to be a negotiated settlement, a ceasefire to get the hostages back, because many of them are American hostages. And yet that is obviously self-evidently untrue, because I don't know if these people are so arrogant that they just think we're stupid, that we can't see what's obvious in front of us. I don't know what it is, but it is completely untrue. And when he can sit there and say that the Secretary of State is trying to, negotiate with people in the region to keep tensions from exploding, and that the parties need to find a reason to say yes to a negotiated ceasefire, not find a reason to say no. And then doesn't even mention that one of the parties just assassinated the negotiating partner for the other party. Now, if that's the case, does that sound to you like somebody who's like, we want to find a negotiated settlement and we just need everybody to be calm? And who's going to do that? You're having a negotiated settlement with somebody, and your side is negotiating, the other side is negotiating. All of a sudden, the other team kills your guy. Now, are you going to say, oh, that's too bad? Well, anyway, if someone then tells you, well, listen, don't escalate. All we want you to do is just send somebody else in there to keep negotiating. Who would want to be that guy? Yeah, they just killed the first guy, and now then you want to send another guy in there? Who would do that? And yet here is the State Department official spokesman for the Secretary of State himself is wanting you to believe that's a reasonable thing to do. So we're now seeking the unattainable. We're ignoring gross reality that directly contradicts our stated policy that the President of the United States claims this is what we're trying to get done. And then when our so-called partner in the Middle East, to thunderous applause by the United States Congress, says, yeah, we have shared interests, but we're doing whatever the hell we want to do. And by the way, we expect you to give us all the combat power that we asked for. And we're not going to do anything that you want us to do. How is that a partnership? See, that's one of the things that people are not taking any consideration of here. And I don't know why the leaders of the United States are not leading this charge. Why am I having to make this comment? And why are so few other people even trying to make it? Whose country is the United States government supposed to defend? Whose interest are we supposed to look out for? Why is it that we're looking out for the interest of a government that is not even fully representative of its people, and definitely not representative of American national interests, other than the words coming out of his mouth when none of his actions are, and yet we support that? I don't understand that. Well, if it was just a Democratic thing, if it was just like, well, that's because the people who were in charge of the White House, and so maybe that's what they want because they want to get reelected. I don't know what their reasons are. Unfortunately, it's not just a Republican Democrat thing. It's a bipartisan problem. Here is former Secretary of State, sorry, not Blinken, but former Secretary of State Pompeo, who's just as delusional. Watch this.
There's no doubt that tensions are high. That those tensions, however, they're not a result of Israeli actions. They're a result of Iranian actions. Every single one of the risks that you identified, whether it was what's happening in southern Lebanon, northern Israel, what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in the West Bank, this is all being driven by a central actor. And until it's the case that the United States of America takes up its responsibility to continue to push back against this terror threat, a terror threat not only to the region but to the United States as well. So long as the Iranians feel like they can safely use their proxies to inflict harm on Israel and Israelis, these tensions are to continue.
Actions have consequences. The classic thing, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Why does Pompeo seem to think that Israel can do anything that it wants to do? And if there are any obvious responses to that, it's Iran's fault. I mean, he even specifically said the West Bank. He added that in there. Folks, The Palestinians in the West Bank, and certainly those in the Gaza Strip, have for decades been abused by Israeli policies. Israel has all the power, and they have exploited the Palestinian people before, who are powerless to do anything. And we want there to be no consequence to that. And instead of the former Secretary of State, former CIA director saying, Israel, who is a friend of the United States, must get their house in order. We are not just going to back blindly forever anything they do when their actions are going to have predictable negative consequences for the region and for our interest as well, and for the innocent Palestinian people. Why is it that instead he blankets all of that and says Iran, that boogeyman, is responsible for everything, even the Israeli actions in the West Bank, for example? Iran has nothing to do with the West Bank at all. And instead of people calling him out for such an obvious misstatement, instead there's silence. The Griff Jenkins there didn't follow up with any questions to him. He didn't call him out on that. I haven't seen anything in anybody's articles where anybody has called out that obviously untruth. But see, Pompeo doesn't care about the truth. He cares about words, trying to exploit the situation to try to just say, hey, don't look behind the curtain. Don't look at any of the fundamentals. Just look at the boogeyman. Let's go after the boogeyman. And of course, there's plenty of other people who love going after that boogeyman. I could show you some things by John Bolton. There's a ton of them out there. You can find them on your own, but I will show you at least one from Jack Keane.
Yeah, it's pretty outrageous. I mean, what Israel has done here, quite successfully, in rather rapid fashion, killing Mohammed Deif, the military commander of Hamas, and also Fuad Shakur, a military commander, obviously, of Hezbollah, and now the chief political negotiator and political spokesperson for Hamas, Haniyeh. And the fact that they've accomplished this, and the administration reacts to this, Mark, by wringing their hands. And their number one concern is about escalation, which in of itself shows a sign of weakness. And this has been the problem, from the outset, is that the horrific attack on October the 7th, Iran operationalized immediately all of the other proxies. On October the 8th, Hezbollah began to fire in northern Israel.
So again, you see Jack Keane, he actually lays out at the first of that, pardon me, all these people that have been assassinated by Israel. Now he wants, just like Pompeo wants, just like apparently Secretary of State Blinken wants, there to be no consequence, like Netanyahu wants. They want to be able to assassinate people left and right, and there to be no consequence. They want the other side to just say quit. Just going to say fold up and just stop fighting. That's never going to happen. Would we? Just imagine this. Let's do a little mental process here. Let's say that the United States is trying to negotiate the end of the Russia-Ukraine war. And we send one of our persons up there, and we want to try to help the Ukraine side negotiate a good settlement. So we're working with Russia's side. Then Russia assassinates him. Russia assassinates an American official who's trying to negotiate an end to that war. Are we going to go, dang it, all right, well, I guess we better just go home and just let Russia have whatever it wants? I mean, you see how absurd it is to even say that out loud. We would be outraged. We would be ready to start talking about firing up nuclear bombers. I mean, we would be talking about it's an act of war, etc. There's no chance ever, under any circumstances, that an American official who's trying to negotiate something could be assassinated by any other actor and that we would be okay with it. We would immediately take retaliation, immediately. But we think that all the other actors in the Middle East should be fine with Israel assassinating leaders whenever they feel like it, and that there should be no responses. Well, folks, it doesn't matter what you want. It doesn't matter what Pompeo wants. It doesn't matter what Jack Keane wants. It doesn't matter what anybody in the United States wants. If people take action and assassinate leaders of any kind of group, there will be consequences. Now, the Israeli side took matters into their own hands last April when they broke all diplomatic norms. The rules-based order that we claim to want to uphold violated in the most grotesque manner when they destroyed a diplomatic compound while they were trying to assassinate one of the leaders of their opponents in the embassy in Damascus, an Iranian embassy, brought it to the ground, leveled the building. And there was a response to that. And there was a rather tame response, frankly, because we were doing at that time all the kinds of diplomacy to try to get Iran not to retaliate too big. Do something that's not going to cause the war to expand beyond the borders of Gaza. And remarkably, that was effective. Iran just chose to react in a way that gave hours and hours of advance notice by sending, they had actually announced it out loud. Then they sent drones, was the first wave. It took hours for them to traverse all the airspace to get to the location. Then they used a lot of apparently older missiles, many of which didn't even make it to the target area. They attacked areas where they knew the Iron Dome was at its strength. And when they had plenty of time to have it, they had plenty of time for the U.S. Air Force, the Jordanian Air Force, and I think even the French Air Force were all up in the air to make sure that they knocked down all of these missiles. So then Iran said, okay, we'll call it a day. We'll say we successfully responded, so we won't escalate further. Now then, Israel said, that's not enough. Now then, we're going to assassinate the lead negotiator for Hamas while we're allegedly trying to get a negotiated settlement that the United States wants. And again, what do you think is going to happen? Well, now, not only did they assassinate this guy, they assassinated him in Tehran. So they chose the most provocative location from which to kill him. They also assassinated Hezbollah leaders in Beirut, in the capital of Lebanon. So Israel has taken as many provocative actions as they can, and there are going to be responses. Now, a rational thinking person would not say that Israel is stupid. They would say, I bet since they've got so much experience for decades and more than half a century in these areas here, that they probably have a pretty good idea how these people are going to respond to that. So obviously, if they wanted a ceasefire, negotiate a settlement of any sort, they would not have assassinated the chief negotiator for the other side. So no matter what anybody tells you, it is flat out true that Israel did not want to have a negotiated settlement. They do not want to do what's in the interest of the United States. They want to do what's interest in theirs. And what that appears the most likely answer is that they want the United States to do exactly what it's doing right now, send in lots of combat power in the area to fight for Israel. Let that sink in for a second. We are allowing our government leaders and other opinion leaders, not even just of the administration, are doing everything they can to facilitate a foreign government to take control of the U.S. Armed Forces for their sake. And now that have us in a position where we may be sucked into a war, not just providing ammunition and arms and weapons and naval and air power for the use of Israel against one of their enemies, but to a point to where we could actually get drawn into the war. We still have many troops that are stationed in the Middle East. I've been railing against this since at least 2018, that all of our troops in Iraq and in Syria need to be withdrawn. I have said until I'm blue in the face that all they do is serve as a strategic vulnerability for our country and could potentially get us drawn into a war. I said it was only a matter of time until some get killed if we didn't finally get them out there. Now, that's already happened earlier this year when 3 Americans were killed in Jordan, just across the Syrian border, in retaliation to some of these other actions that Israel had taken. Now then, they're still there. We're still vulnerable. And I assure you, Iran has the ability to target and destroy American forces in that area should they desire to do so. Because some of these Iran-backed groups in the area have limited capabilities, and our defense capabilities are pretty good about and robust about defending against drones and those kinds of things. But if the country of Iran were to go to war with the United States over this situation and they launched some missiles at some of our bases, we don't have defenses against those things. They will find their target. So Americans need to be withdrawn no matter what. That should happen right now. I mean, it should have already happened. But by all means, it should happen now. Don't just leave them there waiting to be killed and drawn us into a war. And now then you put American aircraft into the air. If they, again, on the behalf of Israel, like they did in April, take out weapons that are coming from Iran, it's possible that this time the aircraft could come under target. That didn't happen last time, because Iran didn't want to back it up. Now then, according to some reports on Fox earlier today, they're okay if this spawns a war and whatever they're planning on doing this time. Other reports have said something different, so who knows what's right. But the risk is very, very high. It's uncomfortably high that we could be drawn into this. And that serves the interest of Israel Well, no, let me back that up. That serves the interest of Benjamin Netanyahu. It does not serve the interest of Israel, and it damn sure does not serve the interest of the United States. There is no reason at all that we should be fighting a war in the Middle East. In fact, we should withdraw the vast majority of our troops from that area because we don't need to patrol that. The nations can handle their own security there. We can handle our security with our ability to project power. And we don't need all of those, like Gary's showing on the screen right there. Those troops are not necessary for our national security at all. And people who say the other are either don't know what they're talking about or they're lying. One of those two things is the case, because I could tell you in the strongest of terms, and I could go into a lot of detail as to why we do not need those troops there for our national security. Just consider the fact that from the time Reagan withdrew our troops after the Beirut bombings in, I think it was 1984, by the time he pulled them out there, until 9/11, there were no American troops in there. Our interest didn't suffer at all. And let me be crystal clear. What happened on 9/11 was not at all a fact of we didn't have troops stationed in the Middle East. It had no bearing whatsoever. It was on domestic problems and our intelligence securities and problems that we had in stovepiping, et cetera. No relation whatsoever. And it would be the case again here. That's a separate issue. We'll go into that later. But let's take a look now at the Deputy National Security Advisor, who is just keeping track. So we've had State Department, we've had former CIA directors, former generals, and now even the current Deputy National Security Advisor. Well, he wants to throw his 2 cents in.
The Pentagon is moving significant assets to the region to prepare for what may be another need to defend Israel from an attack, while simultaneously we are working very hard to de-escalate this situation diplomatically, because we do not believe that a regional war is in anyone's interest in the current moment, and that is something that we've been trying to avoid since October 7th. We are doing everything possible to make sure that this situation does not boil over, even in the context of providing significant assets, U.S. assets, and the help of other countries to defend Israel should the need arise again.
Folks, I'm sorry, I'm just going to have to call it out. He's lying. When he says we're doing everything we can to keep the situation from boiling over, he's lying. We're not doing anything to keep it from boiling over. We're sending all of our armed forces over there and all these packages and all this ammunition for Israel to keep doing. We are turning a blind eye when the Israelis take action that are antithetical to the interest of peace, antithetical to the Palestinian people, and antithetical to American interest. We do nothing. In fact, we do the opposite. We give honor to Netanyahu. We give him a platform to just keep on going. And then you have all of these officials from both parties, both in government and out of government, that do everything they can to forget about American interest and elevate Netanyahu's interest. Because as you've heard me say so many times, even Israel's interests are suffering because of this. Netanyahu has set his country up on a path that's going to harm it. It will not bring peace to Israel. The people of Israel are not going to get the peace he's promised them. They're going to get more war. They're going to get more death, more destruction, because the Israeli Iron Dome is not anywhere near as effective as what people claim it is. And if it comes under sustained attack, especially from multiple directions and attacks in areas where it's not set up to be primarily to be defended against, there will be targets and there will be casualties in Israel. And if Israel itself launches an invasion into southern Lebanon against Hezbollah, then their casualties are going to go way up, and they're going to find that they're going to potentially run into a buzzsaw of their own, and that's going to even cause more problems. Everywhere you look, this has the potential to go horribly wrong for Israel and the United States, all because we are unwilling to acknowledge what's actually happening on the ground. And for some strange reason, we have absolutely handed the keys to Washington, D.C. and the Defense Department to Benjamin Netanyahu. I don't even say Israel, because it's Benjamin Netanyahu. And I don't know, I can speculate on many reasons, and I'm sure there are probably plenty of them, and they're all bad. But that's what is happening. So I want to make sure that everybody is crystal clear on the truth and on the reality here. And that's what needs to happen. I want to go back to the article, the 17th I wrote. Again, this is literally an hour ago, finally came out there. I want to make sure people are aware of what's going on. Emotions aside, I wrote, The United States should not get involved if Israel goes to war against Iran. Israel has fought wars in the past, and we did not fight for them then, yet they handle their security successfully on their own. The reason Washington provides billions in annual military assistance to Israel is to ensure that they are capable of defending themselves. These efforts have proven successful. If Israel can defend itself, or Israel can now defend itself with or without American support. See, that's why I like the Pompeos and some of these other people, and Jack Keane and Lindsey Graham in the Senate. I mean, they are just almost lusting for war with Iran, and they want to use your troops to do it. It's not enough that they just want to send our ammunition. Now they want to send our physical assets to also go and do it, hoping that it won't actually get us into a war. They think that we can just do whatever we want and that there won't be consequences, but they'll be wrong on that too. And then all of a sudden we may find American jets getting shot down. We may find American troops in the region getting attacked. We may find American warships getting sunk. All of those kind of things are possible if we get into a war with Iran. Now, Iran by itself is a middling power. It is easily balanced by other states in the region. It's not like, see, we talk about Iran like there's some superpower. They're not a superpower. They can't project power. Now, they do have a potent missile force. They do have some ability in the naval area, especially with some of their speedboats. So they can do some harm, but they're not going to unless they're attacked, because they know that they would suffer egregious harm if they were to launch an offensive of their own. So they're not going to. They want to deter attack, which is why they were very careful and calibrated how they responded back in April. But now then, because we didn't let it stand there, we didn't allow things to calm down as we claimed that we were going to. Now then, Iran is in a position to where they're saying, screw y'all. We don't believe anything you say, and we don't think it'll ever stop. And the only way we can reestablish deterrence, which some in Iran are saying, is by having a heavy-handed response now. That's where we put them in a position to respond. And that could have extremely negative consequences for America. Though we can defeat Iran, if we ever get into a war, we don't need to. Why should we suffer any casualties when Iran poses no strategic threat to the United States? They're not. They have shown conclusively since 1978 they do not want a war with America, and they have done everything in the possible to refrain from that. They are not willing to just roll over and just let us do whatever they want. So they have low-level things that they have done, indirect things that they have done. Certainly they have supported terrorism in the past. Those are things that are nuisances on the big scale of things, but they don't threaten us. And we don't need to get into a war to it because the cost to us would be too high. That's what the Pompeos, that's what the Boltons, that's what the current Secretary of State Blinken, they're all oblivious to the fact that if we get drawn into a war, it will cost us enormous. It's a cost that we shouldn't even have to fight, but that's what's going on there. So if Israel wants to plunge itself into a war, then they got it. They're a sovereign country. They can do whatever they think right, but we should not fight for them. There is no military mutual defense treaty with Israel. There's not. We have an agreement that we signed on our own to give them money to help them defend themselves. Then let's keep to our agreement and help them defend themselves by the things that we've already given them, not by fighting for them, not by sending the U.S. Air Force to fight, not by sending the U.S. Navy, not by spending U.S. Special Forces or Marines or any other kind of ground forces, any forces at all. If Iran gets into a fight with Israel that they spawned on their own because they chose to take actions that were provocative, then they need to solve it themselves. I do not in any way, shape, or form apologize for that. That should be self-evident. You get into a war of your choosing, then you fight it for yourself. We're not going to bail you out, and we're not going to ourselves get into a war. I just can't believe I have to say this out loud. The United States should not choose to plunge itself into a war for the sake of one leader of another country when it won't help him and it won't help us either. All it's going to do is get more people killed. That's the reality of it. One of the ways I ended this article in today's national interest, I said Israel has an obligation to take actions to ensure its own security. If Israeli leaders take risks that result in more attacks against Israel, they must be prepared to deal with that situation. What should not happen, however, is for Tel Aviv to expect the United States Armed Forces to fight alongside the IDF. Washington should not be a party in engaging in military operations that run counter to our national security objectives and could draw us into a new Middle East war. There is nothing for us to gain and everything for us to lose in fighting a war against Iran. It should be a priority for the White House, only to risk losing American service women and men if U.S. national security is put at risk, not because a foreign government, regardless of how friendly, take action that is likely to prompt an enemy military response. Listen, I just wanted to point out there that I joined the United States military in 1985, initially as a private. Later on, became an officer, served full 21 years of active duty, 4 combat deployments. You know about a lot of that stuff. I did that because of a love for my country. I knew that I would be potentially putting my life on the line and could sacrifice my life in defense of our nation. I knew that, understood the day that I first raised my right hand and swore an oath on the Bible. Most everybody I know did the same. The vast majority of anyone who signs up for America is willing to sacrifice their life for America if we're attacked, to defend our homeland, not to placate a foreign leader. And that is why I have, frankly, a lot of anger at the Pompeos, at the some of these other guys that we're talking about here, the Blinkens, Keene, a lot of guys who get paid by the defense industry. I have anger when I keep hearing them so casually talk about how we need to go after Iran or anybody else, any of these other allies or any of these other adversaries with American support, with American troops, and risk our lives for the sake of somebody else. It should be unconscionable. No one's calling them out on this, but I am. I am calling them out on this because the actions that they're advocating, even though they say with their mouth, oh, well, we're not talking about going to war with these people, yet that's exactly what you're talking about. Because the actions you're talking about could prompt a war, and we may see one before the sun comes up tomorrow. We'll see how it works out. I pray to God it doesn't. I pray that we're allowed to bypass and dodge this bullet as well. But we're playing Russian roulette if we keep on taking these chances that don't and hope that they don't result in us getting into a war. We do not need to fight a war, folks. There is nothing at risk that's worth anything in the Middle East to sacrifice the lives of American men and women who signed up to defend you, who signed up to defend our country, to have their lives lost because of a bunch of people in Washington who want to sacrifice their lives on the behalf of another country. I'm out on that. I'm way out on that. I'm a big fan of Israel. I love the Jews. As a born again believer, that's where my religion started, by the Jew Jesus Christ. And so I am a big supporter of that. And just generally, the people of Israel, I want them to live in safety and security. I want them to be able to live without worrying about terrorist actions or rockets falling on their heads. I want that. But I also want the Palestinian people to have the same thing. I want them to have a chance to not have to worry about living in an enclosed open air prison. I want them to not have to worry about an occupation force in the West Bank. They deserve peace and freedom too. And I'll say it one more time. I say this a lot, but it's so important. If we don't have a path for the Palestinian people to have a future and a hope, then the people of Israel will never have a future of peace and hope. It's got to be both, or it will be neither. There is no scenario where the people of Israel get peace and security and the people of Palestine don't. It just won't work. I don't care if you want it to. It won't. And the longer you ignore reality, the more Israelis are going to pay the price, and certainly the more Palestinians are going to pay the price. And that's where we are. And if we keep going far enough, Americans are going to pay the price. And all of this is avoidable. So as I'm making this, and it's right now, it's 5:10 p.m. Eastern time on the 5th of August, 2024. There's not a war right now. It's still not too late to prevent. We still can prevent this war with any kind of rational, reasonable action from the president of the United States and all the people he's hired to do their various positions. We can avoid the war. We do not have to take this last 11:59 p.m., on the scale. We can still back off. We don't have to cross that midnight line and plunge ourselves into a position to where we get into a war. Because once war starts, There's no telling where this one will end, folks, because not only do you have the potential for it to go from Hezbollah into Israel or Iran into Israel, Iran and Hezbollah, possibly the Houthis as well. You also have the possibility of Russia. Russia has now said, because of America's stupid policies in the Russia-Ukraine war and our unwillingness to recognize reality there, Putin has said, hey, America, you want, and West, you guys want to give your weapons to use on our enemies to attack on Russian soil? Then we'll return the favor. This could be the time they return the favor. We have the former Minister of Defense, Shoigu, Russian Minister of Defense, Shoigu, now in their National Security Council, is in Tehran right now, as I understand. I mean, physically there right now. And I doubt he's just there on a vacation. So it is increasingly possible that Russia is making good on Putin's threat there. And we may find, to our chagrin, that Iran potentially could get some of the upgraded air defense systems from Russia, some of the air defense systems from Russia that could knock down our aircraft, that could intercept anything we send into Iran, should we decide to do that kind of thing. And if Iran then, bolstered by support from Russia, decides to take on some of the American troops that we have in the region there, especially if we participate in striking any targets in Iran. That's the key thing. That's probably their red line. If the United States, instead of shooting down missiles, actually strikes any target inside Iran, as Lindsey Graham has argued, he's arguing again here in the last few days that we need to take out the oil facilities in Iran. Like, that's going to help something. That's all that's probably going to do, is to give them the last justification they need to cross the last red line and kill Americans in the region. So thanks, Lindsey. Great idea. Let's hope that no one listens to you on that. But that's where we are in here, folks. We're at the last minute here. And I pray to God that saner heads can prevail. I don't even know where they would come from, because all the heads I've just shown you on both sides of the political divide are all shouting to take foolish actions here. But we need to know, and one of the reasons I'm making this video today is because I want it on the record that there was a chance to avoid war. If it comes, it will be because we chose it. It will come because of our foolishness, our unwillingness to acknowledge basic patent reality, and instead took actions that were easily predictable to cause war, and then it happened anyway. So there will be consequences to this. And we need to make sure that anyone who takes these actions is held accountable for those actions at some point in the future. I hope that doesn't happen, because I hope that those consequences don't accrue. I hope that nobody is killed because of this, because we don't get into a war. I just don't see how we're going to avoid it at this time, but we'll see. We'll keep watching this for you, folks. We're going to keep monitoring all this. I'm going to keep bringing you the truth, and I don't care if it hurts anybody's feelings. The truth is what it is. And we desperately need more truth and more truth tellers so that we can avoid catastrophic results for everyone. Thanks very much, and we'll see you on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.